All right, welcome back for part three of teaching community, daily living, and domestic skills. So, I just want to remind you all this is a strategy that you should have been taught before, but I want to remind you of the powerful effect of video modeling. And I want you all to also notice that as you watch this video, this is an example of video modeling. I want you to notice the perspective from which the video is recorded, okay? So if you are teaching community skills, and specifically grocery shopping in this case, one of the examples of a strategy that you might use is video modeling. And again, with video modeling, you create the video ahead of time, and then the student watches the video, and a lot of times they might watch it before they go into the grocery store. So it's a way to teach ahead of time the skills. But then there are also times where video modeling might be used during the actual activity that you're teaching as well. So you would teach it in advance, and then they may use the video model to help guide them through each step of the task. All right, so here's an example of video modeling for grocery shopping.
Step 1. Enter store with grocery list. Step 2. Get cart. Step 3. Find the first item on list. Step 4. Put item into cart. Step 5. Check item off on list. Step 6. Repeat steps for all items on list. Step 7. Take cart to checkout. Step 8. Stand in front of cashier and wait to be checked out.
All right, so that is an example. Did you notice that they did it so that they could see what the person was doing? They weren't standing in front of the person who was doing the grocery shopping. They were standing behind them so that you could actually see. So it was closer to what it would look like from that person's point of view. Now, there were times that they panned out, and so that depends on your students whether or not that would work, or again, if all of it needs to be done from their perspective. I also wanted you to notice that when they made their grocery list, the grocery list went in order of when you would encounter those items on the trip or in the aisles. So as they went through the grocery store, their grocery list was in order that they would approach or come up on those items. So again, those are supports that you can put in place, not only the video modeling, but again, something like the order in which items are listed on a grocery list. So there's also some really great apps out there. So if we look on the left, here's an app that is related to its community and daily living skills in general. So if you were teaching something like bathroom safety or you were teaching dishwasher safety, then this app will walk students through that with little videos and with picture symbols. The one on the right, instead of having picture symbols, it has real photos and real videos. And these might be things like getting ready for school, or as you can see down at the bottom, it might have something to do with like the lunchroom. So those are some of the types of apps that you can use. Here's another one. This is one that's kind of like a calendar. I use my calendar for absolutely everything. I live by my calendar and check it before I go to bed and first thing when I get up in the morning. But this one not only has the activity that you're going to engage in and the times, but if you notice, it also has a picture symbol to indicate to the individual what this activity is, for example, for students who are not yet readers. Here's another one that has first then schedule on it. So this is an app that you could put on again on something like your telephone, and then you might have multiple first thens that you would use with an individual throughout the day to as a schedule as part of their schedule. But again, using that first then format. And then here's another one. And instead of just having the pictures and the name or the time, it actually has videos. So when it's time for you to water the plants, you can actually save a video. So a video of the student, video self-modeling of the student doing that task. And so then in their weekly chores, all they have to do is click on it and they can see the video of what they need to do at that time. Here is a video I'd like you to see. And so I'm not promoting the specific uh, piece of technology, but it is just an example to show you for students with a wide variety of disabilities, examples of some of the technology that is available to support students with community and daily living skills, domestic skills. And so what I want you to think about is that this is an example of how technology could be used, but I also want you to think about the skills that would have to be taught to the individual in order for them to use this piece of technology to support them in community, daily living, and domestic skills. All right, let's take a look at some examples of assistive technology. And again, we're not just looking at the technology, but also the skills needed to independently use the technology.
Alexa, turn on kitchen.
You have 3 items on your shopping list.
Alexa, call Sanford and Susie.
Calling Susan.
Alexa, turn on bedroom lights.
Okay.
Echo, call Grandma.
Calling Grandpa.
Alexa, tell me a dog fact.
A 1-year-old dog is as mature, physically, as a 15-year-old human.
Alexa, what am I holding?
It looks like T48 World of Cheese.
Alexa, tell Dagmar it's time.
You want to go for a ride?
Alexa, trigger door open.
And that's so cool. It's so cool what technology can do. But again, I want you to think about what do you have to teach the student? Like for again, well, here comes that picture. What skills would you need to teach this individual in order for him to be able to use that technology to call his grandfather? Not only that, I want you to think about the supports behind it. Someone has to set it up. Someone has to, for example, there was the one lady who had different types of speech, a different type of speech. Her Alexa was set up to understand her. So again, there's a lot of programming and all that goes in behind it. So think about those things as well. But how that use of technology and teaching the use of that technology increases the independence, the access, the self-determination, the connection, the belonging, etc. So there's a lot of adaptive equipment out there. I'm just going to give you literally like a spotlight on a few things, but just to get you thinking about the type of adaptive equipment that is available in order to support individuals with disabilities and being independent. So here's an example of a knife. If, for example, if you only have the use of one hand, or you were not able to stabilize the carrot with one hand successfully as you were chopping with a knife, or you had some difficulty with control, perhaps you have a trimmer, here is an example of a piece of equipment that would support you in food preparation. Here's another example. So again, for example, if you had a hard time or you had a difficult time or an inability to hold something still in order to cut it, what you would do, for example, if you were making, I don't know, French fries with a potato, you could put a potato or a block of cheese or whatever in there, and then you push it forward and you can lock it with that handle and then you can cut. Again, these are just ways to support individuals and those domestic skills. Here's some other types of equipment that are adaptive equipment to support individuals with disabilities in more independently or independently engaging in domestic skills. As you can see, this suctions to your stove, and then it holds the pot in place so that again, if you only had the use of one hand, you would be able to still stir because the pot would remain in that spot. And again, if you if gripping was an area of difficulty for you, or not difficulty, but you needed an adaptation, you could just put a built-up handle on that would make that easier. Here's another example, turning those knobs. That takes a lot of dexterity, really, fine motor skills. So here's a knob that you could put on top of the stove that would support an individual with turning that stove on and off. And then here's another one. So if you're teaching an individual or they have a job or it's their job within your family, their chore is to wash dishes, but they have some type of disability that impedes their ability to do that. And in the case of washing dishes, you might choose to do something like this. That makes it very easy. It's very easy to wash your dishes with this little piece of equipment. So again, just some of the examples of what's out there. Look at this. This to me is really cool. If you have an individual who, for example, might be using a wheelchair for mobility, they may be able to do this where they hold down that dustpan with one type of a handle and then they use the broom for the other. Or if someone was unstable and or had difficulty with stability when bending over, this would be a great example. And then this makes folding something like a shirt easier. So again, just all kinds of adaptive equipment out there that's available for individuals with disabilities. But in order for our students to be successful to learn these skills and then to generalize and transfer these skills into real world settings, we have to make sure that we plan ahead. You have to plan for this instruction the same way you would plan for a reading lesson or a math lesson. You have to start by determining which skills to teach. What am I even going to teach these students? And then, just like you write a lesson plan again for science, you would come up with an instructional plan that you would use to teach this skill. And so I like this is that you start with an idea, then you plan, and then you turn that into action. And so I want you to remember why this is so important. Why is it so important that we plan for this, that we're intentional, that we're systematic, that we're using evidence-based practices? It's because there are so many benefits for the individuals that we teach. If it increases participation in household activities. So that's one of the benefits. What about with things like quality of life, self-determination, the need for assistance, restrictions and limitations? Well, what's been determined is that if we teach these community skills, these domestic skills, these daily living functional skills is what it is that there is an increase in individuals with complex support needs participation in household activities. There's an increase in quality of life. Can we just stop right there? Can we just stop right there and say if we teach these skills to individuals with complex support needs, it increases the quality of their life? How huge is that? That's why I tell you, man, you all have superpowers. You have the power to increase the quality of someone's life. Think about the impact that has. Not only that, it increases self-determination, that independence, that ability to make your own decisions, to make the determination of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, who you're going to do it with. Not only that, it decreases the need for assistance. Anytime we increase independence, we are decreasing the need for assistance. And again, think about how that impacts caregivers or teachers or classmates. Think about how much easier that makes your job because it frees you up to do other things, right? When our students become more independent. And not only that, it decreases restrictions and limitations. And that is what we are all about. We're all about access and participation and belonging and independence. And so teaching community, daily living, and domestic skills do all of these wonderful things, which is why I encourage you to make sure that you're teaching them. All right, so what I want you to do now is I want you to stop and think. How do you identify the important skills that you need to teach? How do you determine what skills to teach? So stop for a second, do a quick write, and then come on back. All right, so let's talk about some of the ways that you can identify important skills that you need to teach in this domain. Well, one of them is you can look at the IEP and any other educational records that come with the student. So if you get data sheets and it's on hand washing, well, we want to make sure that we're continuing that. Look at that data, see where that student was, do some probes, and then let's keep going if they're not proficient yet. But then again, your IEP team may have determined that these are the skills that need to be addressed this coming school year or this coming year. The next one is doing some person-centered planning. And who is at the center of that person-centered planning? That's the student. So talk to the student and ask them, what kind of things do you want to learn how to do? I had a student that said, I want to learn how to text recently when I was doing some research. That's important. Number one, it's writing. Come on, it's writing. Number two, it's reading. Come on. Social skills. Excellent, excellent. Not only that, she was going into high school. Very age appropriate. You want to have a vision for the future. We're not just looking at this moment. We want to look at what do they need in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years when they're an adult. We're going to go ahead and start planning and start working in that direction. And then we want to make sure that we're setting goals. These are the goals that we want this student to reach, and we're going to make sure that we design their program in order to do that. And so another way that you can determine that is that once you know what the student wants to do or what environments they're going to be engaging in. So for example, if you know that they always go to Smith's, then what you want to make sure is you do what's called an ecological inventory. And I'm not sure if you've heard about that before. So I'll give you just a little example of what it is, and we're going to work on it so you'll have a more in-depth understanding of it. But really what this does is it supplements like any kind of assessment tool that you would typically do. And what you're going to do is you're going to go out into the environment. So you would go to Smith's, and then you would actually engage in whatever the skill you're trying to teach the student to do and do a task analysis. And you're going to figure out what skills do I need to teach them for this activity in this environment. And sometimes that might be a sub-environment because it looks very different if you are buying bread at Smith's versus you are buying something at the deli where you have to talk to someone. So those can be like sub-environments. But what it helps you do is it helps you create really realistic goals that are personally meaningful, personally relevant to the student because they're in environments or they're skills that the student wants or needs to learn to engage in. And it helps you to effectively plan your instruction and your intervention. So there are some things out there, like there's the structured ecological assessment tool. You could use that, but you might find that in your district and you may not. So what I want you to know is you can do an ecological inventory on your own. You don't need to buy something like the structured ecological assessment tool. You can do it on your own. And so what does that look like? Well, it looks like, again, going to that environment. So if you were going to teach someone how to order at McDonald's, you're going to go in and you're going to figure, like, what would it be like if I ordered at the kiosk versus I ordered at the counter? Those are two different skills, right? So if we're going to learn, we're going to teach a student to order at the kiosk because that's what we would most often do, then we need to teach them, all right, you need to start here. You need to push this area. That's going to get your order started. And then you need to let them know that your order is going to be a takeout. And then you're going to do the other things you need to order it. And then you need to know that you need to go stand in this area and that they're going to put your meal out here. This is just an example with many steps that have been left out. But what you can see is I did an ecological inventory because I went into the setting and I collected data, or I collected a list, did a task analysis of the actual skill the student would do in that specific setting. And so you're going to assess like both current and future environments that are relevant to the student. So you're going to have it organized, and you'll see this broken down in a minute, but you're going to look at the domain. That's what the skill we're going to be teaching, the overall area. You're going to look at the environment. You're going to look at the sub-environments, if there are any. You're going to look at major activities and routines, and then skills. And that might not make sense, but it will in a second, because this is what it looks like. All right, I'm going to give you a second just to scan over this diagram so that you can see what the breakdown is, and then I'm going to show you an example of an ecological inventory. So go ahead and scan through this, and then we'll come back together and look at a real one. All right, so you can see that we're breaking this down. We're breaking it down smaller and smaller and smaller, getting more focused into where on the specific skill that a student is working on. So let's see what that would look like. So let's say that the domain that we're working on is self-care. That is what our focus is. That is the general skill that we're going to be working on is a self-care skill. What is the environment? Well, the environment is we're going to be doing that self self-care skill in the bathroom. Are there any sub-environments? Well, it can be. If we're at school, we might have a stall. That's one area that we're going to go. We're going to go in the stall to use the bathroom, but we also need to go to the sink area, right? So in the bathroom, we have sub-environments because not only do we have a stall that we're going to use the restroom in, but we also have skills that we have to perform in the sink area. So what are our activities? Well, in the stall, we're going to use the restroom. And so that could be all that you have to have is use the restroom. But you could have that you're going to actually go in, pull your pants down, all those things you need to do. Then you're going to use the restroom, and then you're going to use the restroom and wipe, for example, and then you're going to pull your pants up and prepare yourself to be able to walk out of the stall. But in this one, we're just going to go with using the restroom, and that depends again on how those activities are broken down or individualized for your student. And then in the sink area, we need to wash our hands. Well, when we look at that, we then can break that down for skills. So what are, again, are the skills that we might need for using the restroom? Could be opening the stall door. It could be shutting the stall door and locking it. It could then be unbuttoning your pants, pulling them down, pulling down your underwear, sitting down, whatever the skills are that your student needs. And again, that is individualized and it's based on what your focus is, right? And then washing your hands. Again, it could be turning on the water, getting the soap, and all of the skills we know involved in washing hands. All right, so now it's going to be your turn. If we look at that, I want you to see that is what an ecological inventory looks like. So now what you're going to get to do is to do an ecological inventory, again, going in an environment, thinking about what the skill is, thinking about the environment or any sub-environments that you may have. What activity might you engage in those environments? And then what skills would you need in order to independently engage in that activity? So here I'm going to give you a choice. One, a bookstore. That could be your university bookstore. It could be a bookstore in the area, or it could be a food court. So I want you to choose one of those. I've already told you the domain is a community domain. Your first environment is either a bookstore or a food court, and then you complete the rest of it, okay? So go ahead and stop the video. This one will take you a little bit longer. I want you to complete the whole thing. It is not a quick ride, all right? I'll see you in just a second. All right, welcome back. I look forward to seeing your ecological inventories and the skills that you came up with. And they may be different than your peers, right? Because they may have picked a different sub environment, or they could even have picked a different activity that requires different skills. All right, that's where we are right now. Now, this one was a little bit different because we did hit ecological inventory. So let me know, where are you? Do a quick check-in. As always, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in your document because I will look at those before class on Monday, and those are the questions I will address at the beginning. All right, I'll see you all in the next video.